Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and one of the most anticipated mods for Total War Warhammer 3 is finally out. Mixu's Mousillon. Now, there's a few things that you need to know, as this isn't the same mod as Warhammer 2. Yes, it's the same modder, but it's been changed around, it's been improved. There's a lot of new additions. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about. As you can see on screen, there are two playable factions, both of which have different start locations too, which is going to lead to some replayability. Now, it is very important to note that this mod is in its beta form, so stuff is going to change as time progresses, but let's talk about what we already have available to us, because it's quite big. So, the main faction here is the Duke Naldor, known as the Black Knight of Bretonnia, and he's got the following faction and lord effects. So, faction effects first, defeating a Bretonnian faction leader in battle will vassalize their faction, except for Rowan, Carcassonne, and the Chevaliers de Lyonesse. Request army cost minus 50%, allegiance points gained plus 50% for alliances and vassals with Bretonnia, charge bonus plus 15% when attacking. For the lord effects we have the following: casualty replenishment rate plus 8% for all peasant units, Lord's army, passive ability honor or death, and finally leadership plus 8 for all peasant units in Lord's army. Yeah, you're going to be here using a hybrid of peasants and undead in a very unique playstyle. A lot of people actually used to use this on the tabletop as a themed army list, the whole Undead Bretonnia theme. So you'll start right outside Mousillon. All you have to do is take it over. It's not really a hard fight at the very beginning, plus Naldor himself is actually fairly strong. Your starting army is fairly decent too, as it's very much in the Bretonnian style. So yeah, it won't really be too much of an issue. From there you can decide to move out and just take over Bretonnia, as is your given birthright. As a quick note, you could also decide just to easily subjugate the Red Duke. Obviously you won't get all the benefits yourself, but it does help to have an ally every now and then. Mind you, you can also subjugate a bunch of other Bretonnians. So yeah, choice is up to you. Now, Naldor himself is very, very strong, as you can tell from his stats, and he's got his own unique skill line as expected. He is a legendary lord after all, which will be able to, say for example, reduce the upkeep for your warriors, something that you're going to need, believe me, because these troops can be a little bit expensive as you start building up, and you're going to be thrown into a lot of wars, so it's going to be a little bit hectic at the beginning, but you'll build up from there. But yeah, you can boost up your army fairly heavily. You'll also have access to a few items here, which you can see on screen. There's also a Path to Virtue system, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on, as it's focused around a system which I imagine is probably going to get improved upon a little bit later. Remember that this is a beta release, so things are going to change. However, there is a very big mechanic, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, because the core mechanic for this faction is known as Damnation. Now, yes, this is the Beastmen format, but it's actually fairly different, as you can tell. You'll get Damnation by vassalizing factions, killing faction leaders, occupying settlements, and unlocking special characters. You'll lose it by losing territory, so that's something quite important to know. But what Damnation does is it gives you a bunch of bonuses, and this is naturally progressing all the way until the end. So you can see there's a lot that happens here. You'll be able to get some different changes to our good friend here, Naldor. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting system. I kind of like this. It's his path to actual ruin, which again leads us to the virtues of a past life. Right now, the Black Knight and the Usurper, as far as I've seen, don't do anything. They do change his visual style, I do believe, though. However, there is something that you can get in the final level of Damnation. This is level 5. It doesn't take that long to actually get there, and either way, you'll naturally progress through this as you start taking over settlements, and you want those bonuses anyway, as this is also a way for you to be able to unlock Regiments of Renown, by the way. Damnation will give you some. When you decide to declare yourself as the king, you actually get a really interesting pop-up event, which will give you access to, well, not only becoming a vampire for your character, but a bunch of different effects, as you have access to 3 unique choices. So, say for example, the one with the Black Grail will get you access to becoming undead. All of them will make you undead, by the way. It'll give you access to the Lore of Shadows, but also a Hippogriff mount. But if you decide to contact the Von Carsteins, you'll get a Zombie Dragon. Or if you decide to contact Archon, you'll actually get a War Sphinx mount. So yeah, you have some options here for your playstyle, for what exactly you want. And I think this is fantastic. It's very, very unique and allows you to tailor this Legendary Lord pretty much how you want that. So let's continue because there is even a lot more to this specific faction. When you start your campaign, you'll actually get notice that you have 4 quests, all of them linked up to an individual legendary hero. Now, these are actually going to be picked up fairly quickly into your campaign. One, you just have to basically take over Mousillon. The other one, you have to kill 1,800 enemies. Another one, you have to build up a landmark at Mousillon. And the final one, you have to go just to Artois. So it's not actually that far away. And this is actually a quite interesting system. The first character himself is going to be quite good at 2 things, being very good at administration, reducing costs to buildings and so on, but also being very, very strong in combat. You can tell by his stats, he's fairly good to be upfront and personal, also having access to some vampire spells and also some spells from the Lore of Beasts, which is pretty good hybrid, to be honest. I'm a very big fan of Flock of Doom, for example. Transformation of Kadon is actually decent when it comes to a situation, and yeah, overall, this character is fairly good. He's got the Virtues of the Past Life thing. I'm not sure if that's going to be something in the future as a future mechanic, as again, this is in its beta form, but so far, very, very strong, and you'll pick him up as soon as you get to Mousillon, so you'll have a little bit of help to help you fight against all the Bretonnians, which are naturally going to be against you. Your second characters are known as the Butcher, and this guy can do a lot of damage. I'm a big fan of him, actually. He saved me during my own campaign. I played until about 5 a.m. last night as I couldn't sleep. But yeah, he can reduce enemy leadership, obviously quite beneficial. He's quite good at just being upfront and personal, very resistant to physical damage as soon as you start going through his unique skill line. And overall, you want him upfront and personal as soon as you get him, as I don't know if it was just me, maybe it was player bias being kind of interesting, but I think during my own private campaign, not the stuff that you see here, I had a lot of factions just declare war on me randomly. But let's move on, as we do have some unique other characters too. Like, for example, the lady over here, Nicolette. She is a spellcaster, as she's got access to a bunch of different spells. As you can see here, Lord of Shadows, Lord of Undeath mix. She's very good overall. She's very squishy, so keep that in mind. She will get hit and she will take damage, as obviously spellcasters are generally quite weak. But what she does is she's a great support character. So as you can tell here, she'll be able to reduce the raised dead costs, which is going to be quite beneficial to you. You'll also be able to get some extra campaign movement range and so on. It's just mostly focused on making your other army a little bit better. She does have a lot of items that she can pick up too, which then will start making her a lot less squishier. Needless to say, the characters are very beneficial to your campaign as you start getting thrown into the mosh pit. And lastly, we have the Rusting Blade. So this guy is your character killer. He's your assassin type character. Quite cool, honestly. I like the look of him. I think that he does quite a lot of damage. He can cause fear too, and his skill line is going to focus on making him dangerous. So, especially versus Bretonnians, but he's generally dangerous, which I think he's going to be very good for you. He's good for killing characters. I think he's also really good for just fighting infantry. One thing that's also to note here is that he'll boost up your forces tremendously if you ambush any enemy armies, increasing their weapon strength, their melee attack, and also your ambush success chance. So yeah, remember, this is a Undead Bretonnia faction. This is evil Bretonnia. You're not here to be chivalrous. You're just here to get the job done. So that's one faction. Let's look at the second. This is the Lady of the Black Grail, and the faction effects are as follows. Has access to powers of the Black Grail. Attribute Mastery of the Elemental Wind for Dark Prophetess and Embedded Damsels. Upkeep minus 15% for Brigands and Mounted Brigand units, and Hero Capacity plus 2 for Damsels. Yes, Damsels are going to be a thing for you. Important to note for both factions, actually. And finally, for Lord effects, we have the following. Passive ability, Curse of the Bloody Lady, base healing cap plus 30% for Lord's army, and the Dead Rise Again plus 10% chance for destroyed units to be restored after battle. This faction is going to start in the far reaches of the Warhammer world. Yep, you're joining the Southlands Ball. But being played placed neatly between orcs, undead in both forms, Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, and obviously everything else around it. So you're going to have quite a lot of different factions to fight, which is going to be quite varied. If you liked Malobord's faction, but you want to actually fight a little bit of, you know, variety, which is important here. The character herself is very, very cool, and you're going to have access to a bunch of unique buffs for your peasants, for example, making them actually very good. Like, seriously, yeah, peasants actually becoming fairly decent. All in all, she's a pretty fun character. She is fairly squishy, though, I must say, and she will take a lot of damage until you start boosting her up. So keep her protected, have some Graveguard protecting her, and she'll be good as can be, to be honest. Yeah, she's got access to some pretty good spells. Obviously, she's got the Lore of Shadows, which, as we know, is a fairly good Lore of Magic. Yeah, I like the character. I honestly really, really like the styling here. And what will make her actually fairly unique compared to Malobord's faction is she has the powers of the Black Grail, which is obviously a little take on how Tzeentch's mechanics work with grimoires and so on. But you've got Track Army, Alter Faction, which is actually quite useful, Corrupt a Region, which if you want to spread vampiric corruption, definitely something that you want to go for. I know this might not be most exciting. I imagine that this faction will probably get a little bit of a tune-up as time progresses, but yeah, she's actually quite fun to play. So let's talk about some general stuff now. Obviously, construction's a big thing here. There is no tech tree right now, by the way, but you don't really need one, I'd say. But yeah, construction, everything's going to feel like a Vampire Count / Bretonnian faction. You've got obviously a bit of a mix of both in roster, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's very important to note that the majority of your units are recruited as a tier 2 settlement onwards, but that won't take too long to get to. It's more of the case of it's a slow grow faction, but as you start growing, you start doing a lot more damage. You do have access to some awesome buildings too. You'll be able to spread corruption and spread attrition to your regions. The attrition stuff works in a very similar way to how Khorne has it. Build up this building, and when enemy armies go there, they'll take some damage. But that means that you can actually defend your territories a little bit better. Obviously, you will notice that you do have access to spellcasters, and yeah, that means that you do have access to damsels and laws of magic that you won't normally have access to. So you'd actually have access to the Lore of Shadows, the Lore of Heavens, the Lore of Beasts, and the Lore of Death. I mean, Lore of Heavens with an undead faction is very unheard of. Not completely unheard of, because there's some mention of that in lore, but hey, that's pretty cool. That's the interesting thing when you start looking to it as a sub-faction, and it's very obvious when you start looking towards the roster, as the roster itself is a healthy mix of Bretonnians with their own unique look, and obviously then the Vampire Count units. You've got access to a lot of the same stuff that you're already used to, like Vampire Lords and so on. The only difference is instead of a zombie dragon, they'll be riding on a hippogriff. And obviously you do have access to damsels. There's a lot here. The roster is actually fairly large. And I'd say that they're very well rounded up. You do have access to pretty much anything that you could need for a Bretonnia, well, evil Bretonnia theme. And yeah, it's actually pretty cool to see it this way. But let's start talking about some units, yeah? So it's important to note that a lot's not going to be changing in terms of stats. Men-at-Arms will still be Men-at-Arms, zombies will be zombies. But the difference is obviously that visually they'll look like they're part of a Mousillon army, which is kind of cool. I love the yellow and black paint style. It's something that I've been wanting to do for my Bretonnians, but the thing is I already have an Avalan paint style. So I'm not sure if I want to do it a second time. Yellow is very hard to paint. So yeah, you're going to be used to this. Graveguard looking like Undead Bretonnians rather than just typical Graveguard. All this keeps it in theme, with theming being incredibly important when you start looking towards, well, just in general, immersion purposes, right? There's a bunch of unique units too, like for example, the Black Grail Knights, which, yeah, they look pretty grim. I absolutely love the design. These guys will obviously take the place of your standard Grail Knights, and they look freaking cool. They do a lot of damage. Grail Knights right now are very, very strong. I'm not sure if this mod has changed anything, but obviously we know that the baseline stats are, yeah, insane. But yeah, super, super cool. Something which I think modelers should kit bash. I know it's a lot of tabletop talk here, but I mean, come on, they look really, really interesting. Brigands with polearms will add to your range capabilities while also giving you something new, because obviously they've got anti-large, they've got good range, 160 is pretty much decent. They are very, very strong in close combat too, because obviously, you know, these are armor-piercing attacks too. I love the look. They look like insane men that you'd find in the woods. Well, yeah, they're brigands, but yeah, you know what I mean. Speaking of woods, we have the Grey Men. These guys are really, really powerful. A good skirmishing heavy trooper for you, able to smash through enemy lines. They'll also get more physical resistance as they take more damage. However, they will lose mass. So it kind of pays off in a very interesting way, which I think is fairly unique. I don't think we've actually had something like this before in Total War Warhammer. Plus, come on, they look amazing. It's one of these things where it's really interesting how something, you know, if you use the base, like this is, for example, the Nurgle helmets, and then build from there, you can get something really unique looking. Now, next we have some more brigands, but these ones are on a horse, very sickly looking horses actually, and they've got less range, and that's because they use crossbows instead, but skirmishing troop, right? Skirmishing troop, very fast, you're able to harass your enemy. What's not to love here? This is definitely going to give you a little bit of an edge, especially if you're dealing with some other fast factions. You want to kind of separate them a little bit. If you know how to use these Vanguard troops, you're pretty much golden. Also, through my testing, they're actually not too bad in melee combat either, so I'd say they're better than mounted yeomen in general, which is pretty good. And finally, we have the Draco Leech. So yeah, this is a thing of nightmares. I believe using a similar rig to the Beast of Nurgle. At least, you know, the icon is there for that, so I'm not too sure. But this is a single entity, it's armor piercing, it's got scaly skin, causes terror, it's got poison attacks. It's not too fast. I mean, well, you know, this is something which is pretty dead, but it does do a lot of damage. I think it's actually fairly good for what it does once you get it into the enemy lines. Now, obviously, you do have access to some regiments of renown, which look phenomenal, by the way. All of them are super cool. You've even got, like, say, for example, ghouls, but with peasant gear and helmets on them, which I think is absolutely adorable, to be honest. Obviously, remember that with the Duke himself, you're going to have to get your Damnation up and running to be able to get access to your regiments of renown, but it doesn't really take that long. You know, you just get into fights. But yeah, they look cool. I love the look. They've got great stats. I wanted to point them out. I don't normally look at the regiments of renown, but cool visuals means that they need to be looked at. But yeah, this is a powerhouse of a mod, as expected, you know. Mixu's Mousillon has always been one of the best mods in the workshop. This is still in its beta form, I do have to remind you guys. But it's certainly one of those mods which is going to get better and better over time, and it's already so good now. Here, I'm showcasing a random Bretonnian army and then an army of my choosing, because random wasn't working. It was just getting loads of undead, and I wanted to use a bit of a mix here. I really like the faction. I really, really like the faction. I feel like this is going to be very, very strong. If you know how to use it, if you know how to get into combat, you shouldn't really have a problem. Yes, you have to keep in mind that you are public enemy number one within Bretonnia, and I have not played too much with the second faction in all honesty. Mostly because I wanted the whole evil Bretonnia theme, and it's one of those things that a lot of people, even on the tabletop, a lot of people want, and a lot of people would kit bash. So, yeah, I honestly had a lot of fun. I'm a bit tired, because obviously I finished at 5 a.m. playing, but it's definitely one of those mods that you're going to want to download. You can find it in the description below. It's definitely a new experience, and right now, you know, we've just finished with the Chorf stuff. It's going to be a while until we get more information regarding the next DLC, which I believe the Shadows will change. So you're going to want to try out mods. You're going to try all the best things that you can find on the workshop, and this is definitely one of those. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and with all that being said, have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon. I'll let the rest of the battle play out, and yeah, see ya.
Ascendant! Horsemen! With haste! Swiftly! Ready to ride! Mounts ready! Draw weapons! Squash them flat! Banner! Black magic! Peasant woman! You honor us! Your command! It comes! Mounts ready! Peasant woman! Spurs, lads! Like the wind! Ready to ride? Shooting down! Order and glory! Ride! Get them moving! Doing our duty! Horses ready! Ride hard! Spurs, lads! Send them back to their hills! We serve the king! For the king!